I'm here today with Alexander Wilson from ETC Tax, and we're going to be talking all things crypto assets and the taxation thereof. Say hello, Alex.
Hi, Simon.
Hello, Alex. Let's get started. Can I please give a virtual round of applause for Alexander?
Thank you, Simon. I won't clap myself. There we go. Thank you for the introduction. I'm very pleased to be here today. As Simon has said, my name is Alexander Wilson. I work with ETC Tax. I'm a barrister and I am a chartered tax advisor as well. ETC Tax has been working in the crypto space for about 5 years now. I haven't, because I joined ETC Tax just over a year ago now, but I've been working hard with the team and have developed something of an expertise beyond what we were doing already. I'll share my screen to get to the slides for everyone. There we are. I'm going to be covering what crypto assets are, and I'll come on to why that's particularly important in terms of tax in due course. Then I'll be talking about the tax implications of crypto assets. I'll be setting out a few examples of the types of crypto assets and the issues that arise with them. Then some practical information, a little bit about international considerations, a little bit then about planning. And someone asked the question, what do I think of the future of crypto assets? So I'm going to risk a little bit of thinking about that. Well, first of all, then, what are crypto assets? The underlying technology that supports all crypto assets is something called a distributed ledger technology. What does that mean? Well, if you think about your bank account and your bank details, your balance, your personal data, and so on, all of that is recorded on a central database, and it's administered by high street bank company or whoever. Distributed ledger technology is completely different to that now. Around the world, you've got thousands, hundreds of thousands, I've no idea how many, computers running what are called nodes on any one network. The Bitcoin network is one network. There are now thousands of different crypto networks. All of those nodes contain a complete record of everything that has ever happened on that blockchain. What is then the blockchain? The blockchain is the record of everything that's happened, and it's like a layered cake. It builds up information block by block by block by block. All of the information is recorded in a block, and when the block reaches a certain size, a miner then comes along and validates that block as being a true record. The second sort of layer, if you like, of what underpins distributed ledger technology is something called consensus. And effectively that means, let's say we're working with the Bitcoin blockchain, or the DLT, and I want to send to Simon 1 Bitcoin. That would be quite a fortunate event, because I think Bitcoin is worth about $40,000 at the moment. Effectively, I would send that transaction to the blockchain. The blockchain would then verify that I have 1 Bitcoin to send. And it would basically ask every single node in the network, has this guy got a Bitcoin? And if the consensus is reached that yes, I have a Bitcoin, I will then be allowed to send that Bitcoin to Simon. That transaction will then be recorded on the blockchain, and then that's kept as a record forever. Now that's a bit of that's a run through the technology in rapid pace. We could spend the entire webinar just on that alone, and I'm sure you'll appreciate that. But that's a basic overview. So what assets do we have on the blockchain, or on all the different blockchains? The one that you're probably familiar with is the exchange token. An exchange token simply means it's a token of value. There's a record on the blockchain that I have an asset, say 0.04 of a Bitcoin. That is an exchange token. That is a token I can send to other people to pay for things. Now that's quite limited. And now we have something called a utility token. Now a utility token allows you to do things. And that's where I think this technology is starting to get really very exciting. And the best example of that probably is Ethereum. Yes, Ethereum can be sent to other people to pay for stuff, but it also gives you access to the Ethereum network. Now, why is that? Because if you need to do something on the Ethereum network, or you want to do something, run a distributed application, I'll come on to that, you need to pay for those transactions using Ethereum. Security tokens are tokens that represent an underlying asset. And again, you can very quickly see application here. You could have a security token that represents shares in a company. It could be the rights to an income. It could be the share of a car. It could be anything. So the security token represents a proportion of the value of a physical or other asset. Stable coins are another type of exchange token, but these are pegged to a fiat currency, a real currency, if you like, usually the dollar. And that's done in different ways. One way is to hold a balance of so many dollars. So the person providing the stable coin will have $1 million and will issue 1 million stable coins. And those stable coins are actually backed in value by that holding of dollars. So their value equals more or less a dollar. Their value does fluctuate, but not by much. They are pegged to the value of that currency. Finally, an NFT, non-fungible token. Fungible means it mingles. So if I spend £1 and I get £1 back, it's not the same pound. It could be, but it's very unlikely, but it doesn't matter. The pound coin is fungible. Pounds are fungible. Bitcoin is fungible. Ethereum is fungible. But there is a capacity on the blockchain to mint tokens that are unique. There's only one of them. And that unique token can be transferred, bought, sold, whatever. That's a non-fungible token. Or it could be minted with only 10 copies. And one could have 1 of 10, 2 of 10, 3 of 10, but each individual one is itself identifiable, so it's non-fungible. Mining, supply, and liquidity. There are two core ideas to this technology: consensus and security. Now, I've touched on both of those. Consensus is the network asking the rest of the network, can we do this transaction? Does this person have the money that they say they have? And if at least 50% of the network says yes, that transaction will go through. But you need security on top of that. If that was all it would be very easy to cheat the system. So when whoever he is, Satoshi Nakamoto, invented Bitcoin, he built into it proof of work concept. And it's very simply this, that in order to mint or validate a block of information on the blockchain, to earn the right to do that, a miner has to undertake a very complex algorithmic problem and solve it. It takes a lot of computer processing power. And that is supposed to add security because it's simply just not easy to do that process. So you can't just do it willy-nilly. You have to sit down and make a very concerted effort to contribute to the blockchain. But in return, you get a reward of blockchain if you win that round. You solve the problem first. What you find, though, is that miners, the chance of winning the competition to mint the next block the chances are so slow that what miners do is they club together to work as a team, and then whoever in the team solves the problem, they share the reward. And that is how mining basically works. The problem with that is that, well, as you may have read in the press, the processing power for the Bitcoin network alone is huge, and I think it's as much as a small country year by year. So a lot of different networks have been looking at how to provide that layer of security, but without that huge computer processing power. The most likely candidate at the moment seems to be proof of stake, and this means, very simply, to earn the right to mint a transaction and to win a reward, you need to have a holding of that currency. That means you need to hold it in your balance, not spend it. And the more you have, the more likely you are to be allowed to mint the transaction and win a reward. And the theory behind that is, if theoretically you own 51% of all the Ethereum in the world, you are not going to be a bad actor on the network, because if you undermine the network, you undermine your own value. So it's like a stake, a personal interest in the network. Now, supply and liquidity. How much is there? Who provides it? Where does it come from? The supply, or how many coins there can be, is set by the code that generates the asset. So, for example, it's hardwired into Bitcoin that there can never be more than 21 million in circulation. That is a hard cap. But who provides all of this? The very point of the distributed ledger technology is that it is decentralized. No one controls it. To control it, you'd have to have a 51% stake in the entire network. So where does the liquidity come from? Well, Bitcoin itself has no inherent value. I do sometimes wonder, is there inherent value in the computer processing power that's gone into generating it? I'm not enough of an economist, I think, to answer that question. Likewise, there's no official exchange for them or markets for them. It's all private exchanges. And there's no fiscal backing for any of these. So whereas Bank of England guarantees the Great British Pound, there is no backing for any of these currencies. So the value of Bitcoin is entirely the value that it's perceived to have. And I think largely that is these days speculative, and people hoping that it will go up in value or predicting that it will. There is some effort to provide rarity. There's only ever going to be 21 million Bitcoin. So that's an effort to try and keep the value up. But increasingly, there is going to be utility value to these assets. I've already mentioned, to access the Ethereum network, you need to have Ethereum. Now, if you think of needing a currency to work the internet, how valuable that currency would be, well, maybe we're moving into that direction. Okay, so having dealt with what crypto is in the fastest way that I possibly could, what are the tax implications of crypto assets? What's going on? Now, I've started with that because I think in order to understand the tax implications of any transaction in crypto or any crypto asset, the key is understanding what's going on, what you're dealing with, what is being done with what you are dealing with. And I think that's important because there is no statutory treatment that is specific to crypto assets. So you've got to identify what it is that you're dealing with. And then you've got to find out or work out what's being done with it. And I've written Get Geeky. And the way I have learned how crypto works is by doing it. So when I was looking into liquidity pool staking, which I'll come on to, I did some of that, and that really helped me to understand what's going on. Likewise, at ETC Tax, we've dealt with a number of people who are making quite a lot of money out of blockchain games. And so I started playing some blockchain games as well to work out what's going on. You might not want or have the time or the inclination to do that, but reading about it, understanding it is the key to working out the tax implications. And I do sometimes think, I do think that there's the complexity, the difficulty of crypto is not the tax, it's understanding the crypto, what's going on. Once you've got that, the tax will generally follow. So the first example I'm going to talk about is the classic Bitcoin. We can't really deal with today without talking about Bitcoin. Bitcoin, as we've already touched on, is an exchange token. So it is property. Why do I say that? Well, it's capable of being owned. There is a network and it records how many Bitcoins I have received and how many Bitcoins I have sent. It knows how many Bitcoin I have. So I, for all intents and purposes, own that Bitcoin. Bitcoin has a value. People want it. People will buy it. So therefore, it is something of value and it's exchangeable, and I'm capable of owning it. It's property. Different things could happen with that Bitcoin. Now, I could receive Bitcoin for selling something online, for providing a service. I could even be paid in Bitcoin. Now, if any of those things happen and I receive Bitcoin for that, we're going to treat that as income in one form or another. Miscellaneous, employed income, earned income, and so on. Likewise, mining. If I mine it and I receive Bitcoin, I'm receiving Bitcoin for doing something, so it's going to be income. Airdrops. If you have a wallet with Bitcoin available in it, you may sometimes occasionally wake up to find that someone has just given you some cryptocurrency. It does happen. And why do they do that? It's done, sometimes it's done as part of a scam, but other times it's done in order to promote or raise awareness of a crypto asset. That's called an airdrop. And that might be income. Have you received the airdrop for doing something, i.e. holding the tokens? Then it may be income. Or is it completely gratuitous, a gift, a true gift, in which case not taxable? Now I've got the Bitcoin, I keep it and hold it. If it grows in value, its personal investment and capital gains tax will apply. But if I'm buying and selling Bitcoin, well, then we need to look to the badges of trade. Am I in a trade? If so, income will arise on any profits. To be fair, HMRC's guidance does say that that's an unlikely proposition if you draw from the case law on trading any kind of stocks or futures, etc. It's got to be highly organized and almost part of your day-to-day job for it to be considered a trade. And the same really applies to cryptocurrency. Now we're going to get into some of the interesting stuff. Now, I confessed to Simon at the beginning of this that last night I was thinking about this webinar and I thought, well, there's a slide I should have included. And I'm prompted to stick it in now. And what I may do is after this event, add this slide and then distribute that so that can go out to all of you. So I'm going to use the example of NFT art. And I think that might be the next thing that HMRC turns its attention to. None of this stuff now is in HMRC guidance. It's all fairly novel, I think. NFT art is basically an art that's then minted on the blockchain. So it's a piece of art. It could be drawn art, it could be a photograph, it could be a computer-generated piece of art. My apologies. And what the blockchain does is it gives you a virtual signature or validation that that is the genuine article, it's the unique piece. And some of these pieces of art are selling for stupid amounts of money, millions of dollars. And a lot of money is being made. Now, we've got a large number of clients who are generating these NFT arts. And you can see that there are probably two things that could be going on here. One, you could have someone who buys and sells the arts and these pieces of art in a speculative way. And then we'd be looking at capital gains tax. But note, each piece is individually identifiable, so there's no pooling involved. They are non-fungible. Or we could have an artist, we've got a number of artist clients who are generating this art. Well, that would clearly be a trade in its own right, as it would for any artist. And so there we're looking for income tax. I probably don't need to say much more about NFT art. It's probably one of the easier things to get your head around once you understand what it is. And it's simply a unique piece of art, and its uniqueness and its genuineness is certified by the blockchain. I'll go back now to the slides that I've actually prepared and talk about Axie Infinity. And I've got a picture there that is an Axie. An Axie is a non-fungible token, and every single one is unique. And there are now, well, there's hundreds of thousands of them. And I picked on Axie Infinity. It is a blockchain game. What does that mean? Well, on the distributed ledger, on the blockchain network, one thing happens, and that's the movement of Bitcoin. That's all there is to it. On some of the newer networks, most of the newer networks, there are things called decentralized apps. Now, these are applications, i.e. computer programs, that run on the distributed ledger. And you can issue commands, and then things happen on the distributed ledger. And the potential for that is huge. Now, the gaming industry being the gaming industry, they have grabbed this with both hands, and now there are hundreds, if not thousands, of blockchain games being developed. And one of the biggest ones, if not the biggest one at the moment, is Axie Infinity. And this will be relevant. Why would playing computer games be relevant to an accountant? Because you can earn money by playing them, and you can earn significant money. We have clients who are giving up their day jobs playing these games. It's remarkable. What can you do in Axie Infinity with these Axies? The most obvious thing you can do with them is buy and sell them, and in which case we'd be looking at capital gains tax. You can also breed them. Now, this is where it starts to get a bit bizarre. You've got two Axies, and you've got some currency which you need to interact with the network. You can pair them, mate them, and they will lay an egg. All of this virtual, and in 5 days' time you have a brand new Axie. You can sell that Axie, or you can play with that Axie. If you sell that Axie, what is it? It might be capital gains if you just do the odd transaction. Yeah, you've generated an Axie, you want to sell it. Base cost, I suppose, is nil plus the cost of the breeding, the transaction fees, and then you've got a cost of sale. But if you do it on a regular scale, if you're regularly breeding Axies, I think the badges of trade are quite likely to be triggered there. So we may well be looking at income. But you can also play with Axies. And there is a game. If you've got Axies, that's what you need to play the game. And basically these Axies fight other Axies, and winners get a reward in the coins that you need to interact with the network, to breed Axies, and so on. And those tokens can be bought and sold on Binance and other networks. So they have a value as well. What I think sets Axie Infinity apart, and we're dealing with a number of clients in this situation, is there is something called a scholarship program. The scholarship program allows you to lend your axes to someone else anywhere in the world. They then play them for you. You get paid in crypto. And then the general, usually is that the way it works is then you give a proportion, an agreed proportion of that earned crypto to the person, your scholar, who's playing on behalf of you. And that creates a very scalable source of income for some clients, because they don't have to spend all the time playing it themselves. They hive it off to someone else, they generate income, reinvest that, and away you go. And the rate of return I've seen on this is remarkable. And again, perhaps just touching back on that, and the reason that I've gone through that in some detail is it's an illustration of, to get to the tax point with Axie Infinity, you just need to get under the skin of Axie Infinity and work out what's going on. Which brings us to another example, Pancake Swap. What on earth is Pancake Swap? Again, I've just picked at random one example of this. Pancake Swap is an example of a decentralized exchange. Now, you're all familiar with exchanges, eToro, trading platforms, Binance, where you can buy, sell, trade, even interact with futures on crypto. Those are platforms that are owned by a company or a business, and it's centralized, it's controlled by them. Pancake Swap and their like are another example of decentralized apps, dApps, as they might be called. It's code written on the blockchain, it's commands written on the blockchain, often referred to as smart contracts. And anyone can interact with this smart contract if they've got the right currency to do so. You need a utility token, Ethereum, for example. Now, what Pancake Swap does is it allows you to flip one currency into another. So you've got some Ethereum and you want some Cardano. Pancake Swap allows you to make that transaction without interacting with a centralized exchange. The liquidity to allow for that swapping comes from people investing on that network. And they do that simply by buying liquidity pool tokens. So they surrender some Ethereum and some Bitcoin. They then are given a token which represents 50% Bitcoin, 50% Ethereum, which they can then exchange back for the same tokens later. That gives this decentralized app access to Ethereum and to the Bitcoin, which means that people can then swap those two assets. The reason to do that, the incentive to do that, is that, of course, the network takes a cut of that. A cut will be delivered to the wallet of the writer who developed the decentralized app, but then another proportion goes to the holder of the liquidity token. So you end up with effectively interest for holding these tokens. We're grappling with how to deal with that on a tax basis at the moment. It's likely to be income in some form, I would imagine. But I'm going to come back to you on that because we're still working through that one. And I think the problem here is the valuation of the liquidity pool tokens, because there isn't an exchange for them. But you can see what they're worth because you know how much Bitcoin they represent and how much Ethereum they represent. So we're working on that, and hopefully we'll have an answer, a practical answer very soon. But I think broadly it's going to be some kind of income treatment. And I think it's working out what the income treatment is before we to get that answer. Now I'm taking you through the looking glass to some of the weirder aspects of the blockchain. Let's start with some practical stuff, trading, and that's something that you may well have come across already. This is the kind of stuff ETC Tax was doing 5 years ago. People who were buying and selling different currencies, as well as buying and holding, and then coming to us to ask how to report their profits. Now, it's important to note that capital gains arise on any disposal of an asset. And that's important, any disposal. So if you have Bitcoin and you exchange that to receive Ethereum, that is a disposal of your, I think I'm just looking at that and I've realized I've got that the wrong way round in the slide. I've put if you're buying Ethereum in exchange for selling Bitcoin, that's a disposal of Ethereum. Of course it isn't, that's a disposal of Bitcoin. But that's the important point. It is a disposal. And so when you exchange one crypto for another, wherever it happens, whether you're doing it directly on the blockchain through something like Pancake Swap, if you're doing it on a centralized exchange like Binance, or even if you're doing it directly peer-to-peer, person-to-person, it's a disposal. And so we have to apply, we have to work out the gain on the loss and apply capital gains tax to that. It does seem, it is right, that the pooling rules apply here because the assets are not identifiable. And so the usual rules for trading in securities or futures or stocks apply. So you pair any disposal with acquisitions on the same day, then with any acquisitions in the subsequent 30 days to avoid the bed and breakfasting issue, and then your Section 104 pool. There are free tools and paid for tools that can do all of this for you, do all of the number crunching, the pooling, and more importantly, I think really the valuing of the transactions on a day-to-day basis. Because of course, if you've got a client with thousands of transactions as we have, and that's not unusual, working out the spot value day to day is a nightmare. The software can do that for you. We use Recap, that's a paid for service, it's very good. There are other services which are not paid for, such as Coinly. For practical advice on that, we find that although these software packages do allow you to connect directly with your exchange platforms to get the best results, the fewest errors, the fewest corrections that have to be made, we find that the best process is to take the raw data from the exchanges in CSV or Excel files, tidy them up so that everything is like for like, so that all of the tokens are named in the same way. Because this is all unofficial, it's all decentralized. Binance will call it Ethereum X ETH, Coinbase will call it ETH. So you've got to regularize and tidy all of those up and then put them all together in one CSV and upload them into the software. We find it's a bit more time consuming at the front, but it produces far fewer errors, gives much more reliable results. That's just our experience from over time. Now, an important consideration here, and I think this is somewhere where you may find yourself advising clients, is record keeping. Now, the records are available forever on the blockchain. So if you buy and sell Bitcoin, that record is there. There's every blockchain has an online viewer. You just go to the website for the relevant currency. Ethereum, for example, it's Etherscan is the website. And there you can look at any wallet, see any transaction. It's all recorded so that anyone can see it. Well, that's great. The records are there, fantastic. But they don't cover any internal transactions. So if you've got money going in and out of Binance, that's not on the blockchain. What really happens is you deposit money with Binance. You've then deposited it on a central exchange and they control your balance. And when you withdraw it, they send it back to your wallet. So for those transactions, we're dependent on Binance's records. And the problem here is that, first of all, quality is variable. Some keep very good records, some don't. It's not regulated, this sector. But also these platforms can and do disappear. And so sometimes we have been dealing with clients where we have gaps in the transaction history. And we just have to do the best we can with that. And of course, there is a risk there that if the client didn't keep records themselves, that HMRC could aver that there's some carelessness involved there. It's your responsibility to keep records. So as onerous as it is, the best advice is keep records. Don't rely on the platforms to provide those records for you. The problem with that is with some traders, especially if they're using a trading bot, we could be looking at hundreds of thousands of lines of data for a trading history. So there are practical problems there. Is it trading or is it personal investment? Well, that's not too, I say it's not too complicated to work that out. That doesn't mean it's easy. We apply the badges of trade, simple as that. And that is in HMRC guidance. I think that's one area where I do agree with HMRC. Now, if it is a trade, then of course all profits will be chargeable to income tax rather than capital gains tax. But if we borrow from the case law about gambling, about trading on futures and stock markets and so on, the volume and the professionalism and the regularity and the organization to get over that line into a trade, that bar is really very high. So for practical purposes, I think if you've got an individual who comes to you and they're trading even very high volumes, I think you can be pretty confident that you can apply capital gains tax. One question that does crop up is, well, when do we account for this? And a lot of people come with the misconception, the preconception, that, well, I don't have to report anything here because I haven't withdrawn any of my profits. I haven't converted anything into fiat. No, that's not right. The moment you exchange Ethereum for Bitcoin, you have a disposal. That disposal occurs at the time that you make that swap, and it has to be accounted for at that time. Same with income. When you receive a Bitcoin in your wallet, that is when you've received the asset, and you have to value it and account for it on that day. Income generating activity, we've touched on this already. And there are all sorts of income generating activities that are available on the blockchain. And some of them are bizarre. I have dealt with a client who facilitated the birth of crypto kitty kittens. Similar to Axie Infinity, if you own crypto kitties, you can breed them. And the way that code is written, it relies on external actors to issue the command to the network to say, give birth. So these guys are called midwives, and this guy earned hundreds of thousands of pounds as a midwife to crypto kitty kittens. As I say, some of this gets very bizarre. But we have things that are perhaps more understandable, like staking, which is effectively holding the currency in your balance, and some networks will reward you for doing that. It's very akin, very analogous to interest. Mining generates income. Holding liquidity pool tokens is another one, probably an income generating activity. Well, again, we just go back to basics, and that really is the central message of today. If you take anything away today, it's go back to basics, work out what's going on. Are the badges of trade present? If so, it's likely to be a trade, and we need to think about national insurance contributions. But then we also need to think about, if it is income, is it miscellaneous income? Is it being received for service? Or is it really just personal investment? Now, again, with we'll come on to this in a little bit more detail with staking or mining. There's potential there to be foreign income as well, and that's another consideration that needs to be taken into account. But again, it's understanding what's going on. A couple of other practical points. I can deal with this one very quickly. Theft. I'm very sorry, that's not a disposal, according to HMRC. And I'm not aware of any case law on this, but if you lose your right, if if your currency is stolen from you, or you're tricked into giving it away by a fraudster, you still have rights over that property. It's still yours. So HMRC do not regard that as a disposal. So the downside to that, of course, is you cannot then claim a loss to carry forward. So that's unfortunate. However, if you lose your cryptocurrency, and this is scarily easy to do, and I speak from experience, I have a wallet somewhere that I've lost. I don't want to think about how much is on it, because it was years ago when Ethereum was worth nothing. So I try not to even think about that, but I keep raising it as an example. That was a wallet I held on a computer. The computer broke, and that was before I realized that you need backups on backups on backups. Lesson learned. If you lose the private key, there is no bank, no centralized person or body to help you get it back. It's up to you to keep it. Now, the oddity here, in theory, is it's a private key. A private key is simply a combination of letters and numbers. It's 64 digits long for most networks, and it's hexadecimal in most networks. So it's 0 through to F. So you've got 16 different characters. But 64 to the power of 16 gives you a number that is, now let's see if I can say this, 1 in 115 quarto-vigintillion. I had to look that up on the internet to get the pronunciation of that. It's thought that the number of combinations there is the same as the number of the atoms in the universe, which is a number I think that only mathematicians, theoretical mathematicians, can grasp. But the point there is, in theory, if you can guess your private key, you've got access to the wallet. But good luck guessing that private key. It's never going to happen. But if you do lose your crypto assets, well, the good news is HMRC, provided they are satisfied that you really have, they will allow you to make a negligible value claim. That simply means that it's treated as having been disposed of and then reacquired at the point of loss. So it's a self disposal, and that means you can dispose of it or be deemed to have disposed of it at nil value. So you've got then a loss carrying forward. International considerations. Now, something that's now starting to crop up with us is VAT. And a good example of that is the sale of art, crypto art. First of all, well, again, we go back to basics. What is it? And with VAT, of course, we're concerned with supply of either goods or services. Now, I will stress here at this point, I am no VAT expert. I have only passing knowledge of the VAT angles on this, so I'm really drawing from discussions I've had with our in-house VAT specialist, Keith Miller. And if you've got any crypto VAT questions, I would suggest you either get in touch with me for me to put you in touch with him, or you get in touch with him directly. Now, our current thinking is that an NFT piece of art is a service, although it's a discrete article that can be owned, if you like. In VAT terms, it's not a good. It doesn't qualify as a good, so it must be a service. Now, the problem with that is you then have to work out the place of service, and that's where the customer is in this event. The trouble is, with the blockchain, although the transactions are completely transparent and recorded on the blockchain, they only record the public identity, the public key of the person in the transaction. If you happen to know the owner and the location of the person behind that public key, well, you know the place of supply, and you can apply that if it's in the UK. But the way the blockchain works, the way most people do it, you won't have a clue who your customers are 99 times in 100, if not more rarely than that. So that treatment is difficult. We do have a working theory on how to approach this with HMRC, and we think it's a good response. I won't push it forward at this stage because we haven't had yet any confirmation from HMRC with whether they agree with it, but it is a fairly favourable approach for the taxpayer. But it is a problem that needs to be addressed. Back on VAT, as I think about it, I think it's been agreed by HMRC that the trading of cryptocurrency doesn't give rise to VAT liabilities. A significant international consideration we're going to have in some situations is the situs of the crypto asset. Now, HMRC's view is a very simplistic one. They think, well, if you're looking at a crypto asset, there's only one person who we can identify involved in that crypto asset, and that's the person who owns it. So that's where the crypto asset is. Now at ETC Tax, we're not satisfied HMRC are right about that, but that has yet to be litigated. How much is that relevant? Well, with income tax, I think it's not often going to be relevant. If you're in the UK, you're resident in the UK, you're taxable on all earnings anyway. But if you're non-domiciled, well, then it may be relevant. Again, most income is going to be, if you're in the UK, it's going to be UK income, but it might not be. Let's say you're staking, you're earning interest on a platform, and that platform is owned by a company in the US. I think you could argue that's a US cited asset, in which case it could be regarded as foreign income. The bigger problem, I think, is things like mining. Mining really takes place across the world. But I think for the individual who's the miner, that activity really takes place on his or her computer. But what if you're part of a group of miners and they are spread across the world? I'm not going to give you the answer to that one. I'm not sure that I can say what it is. Probably defaulting to UK, but maybe there's an argument that it isn't. It's foreign income. Capital gains for capital gains tax purposes. Well, section 275A of the TCGA 92 determines whether an asset is a UK asset or not if it hasn't been determined elsewhere in the legislation. And I simply don't think that in that context, HMRC's position is borne out by the legislation. It's not caught by any of the conditions in that section. And so I think you have to say it's not a UK asset. And this is a Bitcoin, is anything. This is anything held on the network as a whole. So I think with if you're buying and selling Bitcoin or Ethereum, there may well be an argument for a non-domiciled person that these are gains that are offshore, and so we'd be looking at the remittance rules. Inheritance tax, as with income tax, there is no statutory position here. So again, it's a case of looking at the facts and working it out from basic principles. Undoubtedly, HMRC will try to argue that it's a UK asset because you live in the UK. So factors to consider for situs.
Alex, just before you start
Yes.
that bit, I'm slightly conscious of the time. We've got about 10 minutes to go, and I've got about 3 questions in the background.
Okay.
Without my questions around crypto kitties and Axie Infinity and how I become a midwife, but I'm just slightly conscious of that. So,
all right.
How much longer we got left?
I think a couple of minutes now.
Oh, perfect, excellent. I'll be back in a minute then when you've knocked these out. Okay.
I'll whip through the rest. Situs, I think we've pretty much covered those points, but they are there in more detail. Planning. If we're dealing with capital gains tax, well, maybe there's not much to be doing. The top rate of 20% against 19% for corporation tax rates. There's often not much that we'd want to be doing with that. Income tax, I think a key or a most viable planning point there is if you're in an activity that's generating a lot of income, look at incorporation. One of the options that's available for a corporate entity, of course, is contributing to a pension scheme for the benefit of the shareholders. That is a difficulty here because you cannot make a contribution to a registered pension with cryptocurrency. It has to be in money. But you can get around that either by using an unregistered scheme option, though you won't get some of the tax benefits of the contribution, or simply liquidating some of the assets, liquidating some of the profit and putting some of the profit into the scheme to generate a deductible expense. With companies, you've also got the option of different share classes so that you can control the flow of revenue to different people in your family unit, or partners and so on. But again, I'm going to come back to the basics. Work out what's going on, work out what asset it is you're dealing with and what's going on with it. Then you can start building up an idea on how to plan with those assets and those activities. Same with IHT. Trusts are a viable option. I have heard, or I have experienced, that trust providers are reluctant to deal with crypto assets. I suspect that will change. I've been in conversations with one provider who is open to the idea, and I think in the near future, I think we will see trusts being used to shelter some of these assets. I do think legal work, until they're regulated, may be required so that you've got a secure position on ownership, but I can see trusts becoming very viable in this space. Finally, the future. I'm not a crypto expert, I am a tax advisor, but the question has been asked and I can't resist at least touching on it a little bit. Well, we've seen that blockchains now support decentralized applications, dApps, programs running over distributed networks. That introduces very exciting ideas. Now, DLTs tend to be resource heavy, but they're really, really secure on the whole. So if you want a secure application with secure outputs that you can rely on, these could be very valuable. It's already emerging in gambling and things like that. Governments are now using blockchain technology to record public records and maintain them, again, because of that security value and that openness, openness plus security. Web domains are now being developed on the blockchain. So web domains ownership of them sits, access to them sits on the blockchain. So lots of exciting developments there. I think we're at the beginning, and I think blockchain is very exciting. And I think where we are now is like in the early days of the internet. So watch this space. It's going to become more and more important to our working lives, I'm sure. The final slide is me and my contact details, and I'm going to thank you all for your patience.
Brilliant, Alex. Absolutely mind-blowing. I know Mark will pop those contact details in the chat box as well. So if anybody wants to speak to Alex about any of the situations that they've got ongoing, then Alex would be delighted to have a conversation with them. I'll ask Shabazz question first. He's popped it in the chat box.
Yeah.
Alex, I have a client that has received coins in payment for work done. The coins are currently worthless as the service being provided by the crypto is still under development. In some time, the coins will be listed on Binance and may increase in value. When the client sells the C pins, is it income or capital gains tax?
Yeah, good question. And in fact, we're dealing with some clients at the moment who are receiving a similar token in a similar situation. Where they are receiving these tokens, which do have a value, but they're not allowed to sell them, or they lose their rights to participate in the network and their income stream. Working out the value of that has proved interesting. We've come to a position, we think. But this, I think, is a simpler situation, but a common one. And I think, again, we go back to basics. So they've received coins, so that is payment, it's income. But if the coins are genuinely worthless, then you've got no income to record, no money's worth. The question is whether they are genuinely worthless or not. They have a potential future value. So I think what you probably would want to do is try to come to a way of valuing those. That might not be possible until they do get listed, and then you see what their initial value is. When that happens, nearly every time the value of the asset shoots sky high, then it falls back down and stabilizes. And that might give you a point at which you can take a base value. It might be worth saying, well, it's worth at the point of receipt something less than that because of the speculative value, and then work from there. Whether or not HMRC would be amicable to agreeing a value, I don't know. We've not had to try that yet, but it's worth looking through the clearance process and whether that's available. Once those have been received as income, yes, then we're looking at capital gains tax if they're later disposed of.
Thank you, Alex. Mentally, in my head, if somebody's received some coins for payment of work done, then couldn't I say that the client, what the client would have normally have charged for that work, that is technically I know there's an inherent risk and reward in that, but that's after the coins have been received. But perhaps I'm making it too simple.
I think if you accounted for it on that basis, HMRC would be happy because you'd probably be paying more tax.
Initially, okay, I'll shut up then.
The less favourable client, I suppose. But I think it's commercially reasonable to be paid in coins that don't yet have a value. But I think HMRC might cock an eyebrow at you saying it's of zero value.
Okay, thank you. So we've got 4 minutes left. We've got a couple of questions that are very similar around the airdrop scenario. Is it still a disposal if you gift a coin to a friend?
Then you're looking at the normal rules for a gift, yes.
So it's just basically a transfer of an asset, just the same as if you transferred any other asset. And the same with when you receive it. I think you answered this during the course of the presentation, but when you receive it, as long as it's truly gratuitous,
yes,
then it's not taxable. But if there's any element of exchange in value for that, then it's taxable, whether it be capital gains tax or income tax if it's a trade. Am I?
That's exactly right. And for that, you need to understand why the airdrop is happening. Now, if it's happening because you have a balance on, say, Coinbase or Binance, and effectively the airdrop is a reward for holding that balance, then you're looking at miscellaneous income, I think. But a lot of airdrops are, in fact, they're truly gratuitous. So as a range of people are selected, I don't know how they're selected, but the developers of the new token, they want it to become aware of it, and it generates interest and value by people having it and then using it, and it increases circulation, increases the chances of it appearing on an exchange, and so you're just the lucky beneficiary in that case, and happy days.
Thank you. And then a specific one from Philip. As a liquidator, I suspect a Bitcoin purchase. What options do I have if the director isn't cooperating?
Wow. Well, first of all, I'm not a liquidator, so I'm not sure what powers liquidators have. But look to those powers. If you've got an exchange and you've got a means of getting information from that exchange, then that's going to be a valuable source of information. If you can identify the public key, that's the public address that is used to send and receive and hold these assets. Once you've got that public key, you can in theory at least pursue all transactions from then on, because they're all publicly known. That might help you to identify if there's regular deposits to another public address. That might indicate that coins are being moved somewhere else, to hide them away, or possibly being gifted to a family member or something like that. So that could be really valuable in intelligence. And then you can start asking questions about, well, we see so many transactions to this public address. Who is it?
Brilliant. Excellent. Thank you. So we're almost bang on 10:30. You have blown off. Cryptocurrency was already out there, a blockchain for me. But when you started talking about crypto kitties and midwiferys and cats laying eggs, I think, which is not technically possible, but it just completely blew my mind. And I spent a weekend doing some reading around the subject. So thank you very much, Alexander, for
not at all
sharing your knowledge, and I know piquing people's interest in the chat box around the tax and how it all means. So that just leaves me to say thank you very much to all the members of the community that's come along this morning and asked questions and shared their insights. Thank you very much for coming, and for Alexander for coming along and sharing his technical expertise in such a way with some calmness and clarity, Alex, in a way that, as you say, making the complex simple. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Matthew. And any questions, please do feel free to
yeah,
get in.
Alex's contact details are in the chat box, telephone number and email address, and no doubt you can connect with Alex on LinkedIn as well. So if you've got any questions at all that you would like to ask Alex, then please feel free to ask them. And for those of you on the call that are coming along tomorrow night, lots of exciting stuff going on in the chat box with that as well. We look forward to seeing you. So until then, thank you, Alex, again, and bye-bye for now.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye, bye-bye, bye-bye. Wow, what a session that was by Alexander Wilson from ETC Tax around crypto assets and how you tax them. The stuff on bunnies and whatnot completely blew my mind. Please remember to subscribe to this channel so you get notified the next time we upload a video. Please like this video and also add any comments or questions below this video and we will gladly answer them for you. On the screen now, you should see 2 videos somewhere suggesting what we watch next.